the bell has rung. So get seated and join Elementary Schooled for today's interview.
All right, have a seat. The bell has rung. Today we have Elementary School Season 1. This is episode 13, and I'm delighted to have a children's author with us. Thank you, Shelly Brown. This topic is right on how to get kids excited about reading and writing. And so I thought it would be fun to have an exceptional author with us. And honestly, before I started this podcast thing, I just prayed to the Lord and said, please just line up good people for me. I know a lot of good people. And then I met you this year, and I just had that feeling that I get, like, I really want to interview her. I love your presentation to kids. I love your messages in your books. And so thank you for being willing to do this.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the kind words.
You are a light. I would like to read your bio real quick. You are the author of the thought-provoking children's middle grade books, Mustaches for Maddie, Squint, Willa and the Whale, which is what our class is in the middle of right now, Virtually Me, and The Wild Journey of Juniper Berry. You also write scary books for young readers, like your book, Ghostsitter. You co-write some of your books with your husband, Chad Morris. I love that. You have written 5 books together, and you have 5 children. When you're not writing, you can be seen substitute teaching. That's so great. Doing author presentations to kids across the country and watching K-dramas. You love to discover the world. You love people, cultures, and food, and you adore Austen and Dickens and Hardy, and you're Patronus. I had to take a minute with that when I read that your Patronus is an otter. It made me think about what my Patronus is. And definitely I'm going with a sea animal like a dolphin. So yes.
Nice. And the nice otters, not the mean otters.
Yeah, the nice ones. Absolutely.
Hands while floating. Those otters, not the ones that like rip animals apart, not those otters.
Right. Yes.
They might actually be the same otter, but I'm differentiating them.
Oh, I love that you, well, let's first just start with, I know you go on a book tour. And so what is that like for elementary age?
Are you asking what it's like to be an author doing it, or what do I present when I do my book tour?
Yeah, well, let's do both. But I do want to, since you came to our school and I was just so impressed with your presentation, I thought, wow, I wonder how often you do this or what that's like.
So as we release a book, we'll usually do a tour a lot of times spring and fall, like in the spring and fall. So we'll give it like a whole full year seasons of going around. And I've been doing school visits from like Maine to California. Just mostly continental US is where I end up. A lot of the Midwest, a lot of good schools, a lot of good kids, a lot of great kids.
Yeah.
But I love it. I love seeing teachers in their element. I love seeing these kids getting so excited about reading and writing, and it's totally worth it. It's a lot of prep on our part to make sure it happens.
Sure.
And there's definitely different feelings about it from people. Like, I think some people think that it's like a complete sales pitch, which is never what my presentations are. So we get ignored in some areas because they don't understand what we're proposing and offering. And then some areas are like, we will pay you all this money, please come, and are very, very excited. And so it's really interesting. It's humbling for sure.
Well, I love what you're saying, because that's one thing that I really got from you, because we do have authors come to our school every year. And when I heard yours, I did not feel promotional at all. I mean, your excitement, and that you're talking about really encouraging kids to read and write, and how you did it, and that you're very authentic with your story, and that it was actually, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but that it was actually difficult for you to get started and get your first book rolling. And kids need to hear that, and adults need to hear that, because any project or anything we do, it's a lot of work and a lot of time, and it doesn't just happen overnight. And so that's part of what I loved, is just your authentic and light message, but also saying that it takes a lot of grit and stamina to keep going. And if you believe in a project or your work, do it and keep going with it. So will you share a little bit of your background and how you became an author originally?
Yeah. So a lot of people, they like have just this bug in them and they have to write and they have to tell stories and they've always been that way. My story is a little bit different that way in that, when I was in college, I was doing a lot of acting. And one of the things that I was doing was the comedy troupe. And one of the guys in our comedy troupe, once we had graduated, he was like, I'm going to write children's books full time. And we were like, okay, like for your job. We thought that was a little bit crazy because I don't know, it just felt like a big dream. Like, and we were like, oh, okay, well, I mean, like maybe on the side of something else that you're doing, but he did it. And it's Brandon Mole. He's a New York Times bestselling author. And he hit the Times list. Like, I don't know, it took him 5 years to really get rolling, but like in like that time frame, he hit the Times list.
That's fast.
Oh,
I think, I don't know.
It is. And not everybody writing stories should expect their story to turn out like Brandon. But at the same time, it was inspirational to say, hey, like you can write stories. And my husband had always wanted to be a writer. He's that kid. It wasn't me, it was him. And he just thought that was such a cool idea. And I don't think he ever was like aiming for like full-time writing and Times list like Brandon. He just was like, I could actually get a book published. Like just that idea alone was enough to really, light a fire and excite him. So he started writing books and got his books published, which was so cool. And in the meantime, I was raising 5 kids and just really content reading.
That's a lot.
I will be a lot.
Yeah. And I'm reading to my kids and that's enough. Yeah.
Yes. And I loved reading. And so, and I had no problem with that. I'm busy. I'll just do my reading. But one time I was reading and I had this idea for a story that I needed to read, but nobody had written it. And so I told my husband, I was like, hey, can you write this story for me? Like, and I'm not making him, I didn't dictate what the story was like. He could use his imagination and create it any way he wanted. I just had like the basic few premise points that I'm like, I need a story that has a few of these things going on. And he said no, that he wasn't going to do it for me. And I was like, rude. I'm using your kids, write me a book. But what he was saying was that was for me to do. That's a story, like if it's my story, I'm the one who needs to write it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, then maybe it will never get written, And he was like, that's fine. It just won't, nobody else is going to write that story. And I was like, wait. So I like went through like actually a few months of thinking, nobody's going to write that story.
And you
I
wanted
need that story in my life. And
it was this story, Mustaches for Maddie?
It wasn't.
Which book was it?
It's a book that's never been published. It's a prequel to the Cinderella story because I need to understand things like where the heck a fairy godmother comes from.
I love this.
What kind of a man marries that stepmother, but he's a really good father. But like, I was like, there's not enough going on here, which there never is. Those fairy tales are way too short. And
weird. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in the fairy tales. Yeah.
They just throw it in and they just go, it doesn't matter. Just throw it in. Just use it. Yeah. And so I just wanted kind of like set me up to understand this story better. And that story is still sitting on my hard drive. As crazy.
Is that right? You're going to make that happen. I feel it.
Yeah. My agent's like, nobody buys fairy tale stories right now. I don't think he's right, but we'll see.
Oh, I like what you're saying. Sign me up.
I know. I know it will go someplace sometime, but I started writing in 2010 and I didn't get published until 2016. And so that's kind of how it set it up. And my first book was Ghostsitter.
Okay.
About the girl who's being haunted by ghost toddlers.
So fun. It's so fun. It gets kids right in there. They love it. So did you test a lot of these things out on your own kids?
Ghostsitter, I definitely did because I remember being a child pretty darn well. And I remember reading scary books as a kid and thinking, these aren't scary enough. They just were never quite. And I didn't want to be terrified. I didn't. but everything was a little bit like, and then the ghost said boo. And I'm like, that's not scary. Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but you don't want to push the limits too far. So
Sure.
my
Sure.
kids were my guinea pigs, and I was and they don't have a high scare tolerance. Like a lot of things scare them. So I was like, is this scary? Is it too scary? You know, and so
Mhm.
they
It gave you a good barometer to see what this is like. I love that. Your messages in your books are so good. I mean, I know every book has a theme, every book needs a message, but I feel like you really connect with kids. Where did that come from? Is that because you have 5 kids, probably?
Yeah, actually, most of the messages come straight from trying to parent my own children or being in schools as a substitute teacher. And then my husband's also a teacher. And so we're in schools and we're like, oh, they need one more voice to say this to them in hopes that they like internalize some of these things. Like I'm trying to tell you, but like to hear one more way of learning this message, which is fairy tales, right? Like they're trying to tell a story and send a message to the kids. Hey, don't talk to wolves in the forest. I don't know. That's the messages are a little lost over time, but
right. But just bringing, you know, because kids need a lot with recognizing what their emotions are and how to work through a lot of emotions. And so I know with Mustaches for Maddie, that's always a popular one in 4th grade. You know, it kind of depends on what the age level is, but you know, your themes of bravery and compassion. And you write that that is a story kind of based on truth. Is that right?
it is.
Tell us
It
about
is.
that a little. Well, tell listeners a little bit about the book and where that came from.
So Mustaches for Maddie is about a girl named Maddie who has she's going through a little bit of a rough spot at school where she's kind of dealing with like a little bit of like bullying's a little bit hard of a word, but just kind of finding her place in school and with the other kids and like and then she deals with it all with humor, and that's just how she kind of deals with life. And fake mustaches are her favorite. She thinks they're hilarious. Everything's funnier with a mustache. And then she finds out that she has a brain tumor, and it kind of hits her really unexpectedly, and just kind of the way brain tumors will hit you, you know, you don't see them coming, that's for sure. And then she's gonna have to figure out how to use her family support, her sense of humor, and these mustaches, and just and then at the same exact time she's dealing with all this, she still has to go to school, and she still has to deal with the people at school and how things are going there, because nobody's life stops when there's like struggles going on in them. Like, you know, big things can happen. Your grandmother can pass away, and you still have to go to work or school, or, you know, like, and you still have to continue to deal with the daily struggles while you're dealing with the bigger struggles. And so I wanted it to be realistic in that way. That was one of our goals, is to just show that life builds on these struggles, and you still just keep dealing with them. And you're totally capable of it. You can do it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I noticed a pattern of a lot of students, they get, you know, popular books get passed around the classroom and they talk to each other. And so that's so great. And so I'm like, I need to read this book, and brought it home. And then I saw your, on your website, and I would love to add the link where you have the little video. It made me cry with the mustaches, and you have it to like this great music. And it just made me cry. Like, oh, I feel this. I feel her story.
So Mustaches for Maddie is based on the true story of our daughter, Maddie. Both Chad and I were writing stories, but we weren't writing like true, serious kind of stories. Like that wasn't our thing. But Chad's publisher had asked if we would be willing to write Maddie's story. And we thought about it pretty hard too, because it's like, it's a true story. I mean, what if Maddie hates it? Like, what if she's like, oh my gosh, this will forever live out there, and it's got my name on it, and it's, you know.
And how old was she when she was diagnosed?
The first surgery was 9 years old. The second one was 11 years old. And
Wow.
you know, she ends up with 2 surgeries. She actually, in December, had her 3rd surgery, a 3rd brain surgery. So
Wow, that's so much for a child.
yeah, it's no fun.
Yeah, as a mom, I feel
But
that.
we went from 11 years old to 19 years old. And so that's awesome. We're really grateful for that time.
That is beautiful. And so how does she feel about the book? Was that really, I would think, therapeutic for her?
I think she's got mixed feelings. Like the book, sometimes kids will read the book and they will think the Maddie from the book is exactly the way the Maddie is in real life. And she's a little bit like, that's a little bit of a fictional Maddie.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of things in there that are basically 100% true. Her family with her brothers, all of the like medical timeline and stuff, that kind of stuff is all pretty accurate to what really happened. And then we take the school stuff, and the school stuff gets tricky because it's a bunch of children. And if we were going to be true, we would take a bunch of real life children and put them in a book, and all the good and the bad things that they do would end up in this book forever. And we just couldn't do that to kids. Like, I'm glad nobody wrote a book and immortalized the things I did.
Right. So you had to switch that up a bit.
So they're going to recognize some things that happen and stuff like that if they read it, but they'll know that none of these characters are actually me. Even the kind of bullier characters, they wouldn't ever, they might be like, oh yeah, I did that, but I didn't do any of those other things. So they would be able to pull themselves out of the character and not take it on themselves.
But I think that's why kids connect with this book so much, because the best way for kids to heal is through books, and ones that touch on those same kind of feelings. And just like you said, kids will go through something really hard, but life is still going. They're still, they're going through a divorce, and their parents are going through a divorce, and they're still coming to school, and they're feeling all these emotions. And so that's why I like Willa the whale too, because that she's experienced those things, but then connects with the whale, and the whale talks to her, and she's able to communicate in a different way. And I think kids, they want to explore that with their imagination. Like, I want someone to talk to. Maybe it's my stuffed animal, maybe it's an actual person. But I love that's it really does connect with kids. So how do you, well, first I want to go back. Is it okay if I add the link, the video of the mustaches?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the
inspiring.
Yeah, one of the powerful things about the true story is that people sent in pictures of mustaches to cheer Maddie up because she liked mustaches that much. And just the idea that you can do something small and it can have a big impact, because sending pictures of mustaches is pretty small and kind of silly, but it really helped her through everything that she was going through.
Absolutely. That is kind of like beauty for ashes. You just have to, what are the parts of this that we can take, and that the fact that you as a mom too, something so heavy, but that you would be able to put that into a form of a book, you and your husband. I love that. I know as a teacher that there are really only two ways that I can ensure that I have everyone's attention in the classroom. And these aren't in order, but one is just to sing with them. Anytime I sing with them, do music, I've got them. But the most powerful way is with books. Always. If things are going on and it gets chaotic, I can just get a book and get right into it. And I have every single child. And that's part of the magic of what books are. And so I loved, as part of your message, is that you are encouraging kids to read, keep finding that book, because sometimes you have kids are like, I can't find anything. How do you do that? And what have you seen as you've kind of traveled across America and visited different states and connected with kids? What are you finding are the best ways to motivate them to read?
I think one of the fastest ways to unmotivate a child to read is to tell them they have to read this book or this kind of book. And there's something about the lack of agency in the whole thing that kids immediately like, I don't know. And when you tell them what you like isn't acceptable. You want to read a graphic novel? That's not really a book. Oh, your, Guinness Book of World Records, that's not really a book. Those don't count as books, like you're going to get them inside their head too much in a way that's going to discourage them from picking up books, but because there's a lot of things that are wonderful to read. Now, as a teacher, sometimes you have to give assignments, and that's fine. That's not the same thing. I'm saying recreational reading, if you start getting really like picky on them for recreational reading, when you say you're too old to read graphic novels, it's like, what? I read graphic novels. I don't even know what I would think if somebody at the library was like, excuse me, ma'am, but these books are all children's books, and you're going to need to pick some adult books that are more at your grade level. You know, like I'd just be like, I'm leaving. Like I would be so perturbed.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to enjoy a story. So if a kid wants to pick up a picture book, let them look at picture books, because then they're going to continue to love stories. And I think that just opening that up to them and continuing to open that up to them. And like, I love that, like when you're talking about reading books to them, like I really believe in the power of that, because I think that kids also think books in a library equals the task of reading. And I don't like the task of reading, at least some kids. There's definitely kids out there who are like all about it, but some kids are like, I don't like the task of reading. It's like, wait, stop, pause. That's a story. And I know you like stories. You come in talking about that movie you watched last night. I know you like stories, you know?
Yeah.
And so I just like that idea of helping them realize that video game that you're playing, somebody wrote that story so that you could play that video game. Like, you like stories. Here's another venue for stories. And I think you're going to like it, you know, just to get them excited about that.
And finding that can be tricky, but I love one thing that I think you're saying is don't get so focused on their grade level or their level of reading, because sometimes at conferences we'll have parents say, well, what are some books at their level? And of course we want kids to be challenged, but if they're immersing themselves in reading, that is really the best that you can do. All colleges is reading and writing. So immerse kids in reading and what they want to read is just the best. And also we live in a data controlled world now, even in education, there's all this data. And so we really have to kind of balance that out. Like, don't worry about the data. Let's just read. And I think that's what you're saying. Just get in there and do it and explore.
Make them think that they like the library. They like reading. They like, you know, looking at a bookshelf. Like, and once you get them at that space, then they can start exploring beyond that. But it's also a little bit like when you're like, let's get them at a higher level of reading. Let's push them into these kind of books. Well, I would also be annoyed if they were like, you're a female in the, 30 to 50-year-old age range, and we would like you to be reading romance novels. If I don't want to read a romance novel, I mean, I don't mind doing it as a like academic exploration. So if it's with the class, etc., then that's fine. But like for my free time, like you're gonna push me into a space that I don't want to be in. You will find plenty of fun and stories, and then you keep doing it. Your vocabulary is going to increase. Your ability to understand so much more of the world is going to increase. And that's just, it doesn't matter what genre. It just doesn't.
That's right. And overall fluency, which is really what our goal is as teachers. We do want to help them with their pacing and their overall fluency and comprehension. But if they're not interested, it's not going to happen. I have had discouraged students that have maybe sensed that they're not as good of a reader as other kids, which happens all the time. They're all at different levels. And sometimes they'll come into our class a little bit discouraged about that. And my teaching partner, I'm a job share. So we share teaching in the classroom, and she's an avid reader as well. And it's always pumping up the kids about books. And just by changing the interest level, it's like the lights just start to go on. Like they don't even realize they can enjoy this. We had a student in the past who, teachers do reading logs. We do. Read your 20 to 30 minutes a night, put it on the reading calendar. That's very common. We had a student one year that it was not happening. And the reading calendar wasn't ever happening. And so I'm like, how do I reach this student? And we kept having conversations, and he loved video games. And so I had to do some digging, but to find a book that where this boy was living inside a video game. And honestly, all of a sudden, and I said, I don't care if your mom ever sees your reading calendar, you just mark it, leave it in your homework folder, and you just mark it, and don't worry about minutes. What if you put pages? And I would see these little increments. 2 pages is what he started with, 2 pages. And it went to 4 pages, and it went to 5 pages. And all of a sudden he's telling me about the story. And when you see a child's lights go on over a story, it is magical. It changes their life for them to really kind of get moving. So I love that advice. What about the writing? Because kids come to us not liking writing because there's a lot that goes along with that. What do you say?
Yes, I would say it's the same kind of thing that I had said about reading, where they think, oh, going and picking it out, this is about like an intellectual reading thing, whereas it's about stories. And I think you can encourage writing in the same way, but just, it's a little trickier because you do have assignments that need to be written and stuff like that. But making that a variety of things, like giving them the opportunity, because some kids will light up, their little internal lights will go on when you say write about, you know, animals, and they're like, oh, I know so much about animals, you know, because they do have interests. Kids all have interests.
Sure.
So they have the opportunity to write about what their interests are. But some kids flourish in that make-believe pretend space. And some kids are gonna rather journal, you know, like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to write. And it's like, well, what happened today? Just write that, you know, like, and I think the variety of it, I think, gives them an opportunity to see where they sit on where they like writing. And then I mean, these are not, I don't feel like I'm saying anything brilliant or you haven't heard before, but like the ability to do like young authors programs, or like I know a teacher who works with the kids, actually, and I know a librarian who does something very similar, but they work with the kids in the grade level, and in the, you know, for the whole 4th grade, everybody like submits their book into a book, and every child goes home with a copy of the book with everybody's stories.
One story.
But they worked all semester on those stories, you know, they this is their 4th draft of that thing, you know.
Yes.
But and kids whose stories are like 5 sentences, you know, the teacher like has to put a little more effort to get them to make that into 10 sentences, so it's a little bit more fleshed out of a story, you know. But
we combined their work into a book, or there are companies where you can have each family, you know, submit some money for their own book and buy the book where it's bound. And that is a big hit because they love to see their work in a real bound book. Yeah.
Right. Well, and a lot of education is like basketball practice, but you don't get a lot of games, and that's like a game, you know, like,
yes,
look what we did, you know, like, exactly. So all that practice,
here it is,
to the game, you know, so it gives them that opportunity to get to that space. And I think that's really good, especially for writing, which can be a tricky thing to motivate.
Well, I think just what you're saying, even though when you say, you know, maybe this has been heard before, yeah, of course, these practices, but just the excitement behind it. And that's what you provide too by coming into our schools as an author and saying, I do this is what I do, and I'm excited about it. And then that is very contagious for children. So I know too that you hosted a little party at our county library, and I had one of our students came in the next day, and she bought one of your books. It was your virtual book. What's the name of that one? Virtually. Yeah. And so I haven't read that one, but she said she had a bookmark in it. And I said, didn't you just get this last night at the party? And she said, yeah. And I stayed up a little late because she was like 3/4 of the way through the book, and it's a big book. And so that again, just kind of feeding off the excitement. So I think opportunities of going to the library, whatever event is happening, when authors do come, you know, we get maybe 2 or 3 a year, but the library is, I want people to rediscover the library again. What do you think about that?
I think inviting any sort of like author into your classroom or into your school is incredible for that, because there's kids all the time that wouldn't naturally have said, I want to be an author, until they meet an author. And then they're like, oh, that's my husband. Actually, that is how he decided he wanted to become an author, was he actually wrote a letter, and then the author wrote him back. And he was like, this is a real person, like, who does this? And that is so cool. And I think that it's oddly powerful for the those particular children, you know, like as far as getting excited about reading and writing. And I get a lot of kids. So my books are aimed between 3rd and 6th grade is kind of the like general aim of those books. But I ask schools to invite their 2nd graders if they can. And I don't think that most of the 2nd graders are at that reading level. That's about a reading level above them, but it is pretty awesome when those little 2nd graders are super excited to read chapter books that are just a little bit above them. They'll put in just that little bit of extra effort. Some of them can totally do it, like no problem. They had just never been challenged or excited about doing it. And some of them then look forward to the next year when they're a little bit more capable of doing it. And then they pick them up and they're excited. So I love watching a kid too, just, I don't know, dream a little higher than they were before, and the power of that.
There is power in that. I can tell you that just that one experience, that one presentation that you did really lit a fire under many of our kids. We talked about there's no greater way to be in touch with our emotions than with a great book. What are some of your favorite themes and messages from your books?
I personally, when I'm reading a book, I really want it to change my paradigm. I want to feel like I'm a little wiser for having read it. And one of the great things about books, you had already mentioned it, was empathy. Books are really good at being, a lot of times, this kind of books that I write, that contemporary book, either like a window where people can kind of peek in on the lives of people who aren't like them, which is good for our souls to say, oh goodness, like when I do meet a person who's struggling like this, I have a better idea of maybe what they're going through and how I could help them, as well as it could be a mirror. And sometimes for the first time, they're seeing themselves in a book and being like, I can be the hero of the story, you know, me. Not everybody has, in history has been able to see themselves in these stories. So it's really a blessing that we have the diversity of books that we have to allow kids to be able to see themselves in these books.
No, you hit it right on, because having these themes and these messages with kids, they are able to say, ooh, I connect with that. And when we're trying so hard to teach kids better conflict resolution, out on the playground and things that happen behind the scenes, especially, maybe happens after school or on the weekend, we're trying to teach these kids these kind of skills. And if they can connect to a character in a book that has some of those ideas and skills, that really resonates with them, and they're able to internalize that. And so that's why I think one of our favorite things to do as teachers is to always have a book going in our class where we're reading together. Right. Like we just finished your Mr. Henshaw. And like I said, right now we're reading your the Willa and the Will that you wrote, and they're loving it. And so that we can have these discussions and talk about the characters. When you say, I know you have 5 kids, what are the ages of your kids now?
You know what? My kids are older now, and I have a 21-year-old, a 19-year-old. Maddie's 19. Her older brother's 21. I have 2 twins who are seniors at 17 and a 14-year-old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that that's been part of your writing, is just seeing them and their lives and what they experience socially.
Yeah. Well, I have a really bad short-term memory, but my long-term memory of being a kid, I really remember those struggles really well. And so being able to watch my own kids go through some of those things and being able to remember what it felt like to go through those things. And I feel like there's a lot of transition in those age ranges when I'm talking about like where our books sit between like that 3rd, 4th, more in that 6th, 7th grade age range, like 12, 13, 14. Those are some messy
Those are the gnarly years.
They're tough.
Yeah.
They're so tough. And I think being able to have a mirror for kids at that age, to be able to look at that kid and go, he's got it tough. She's got it tough. Everybody's got it tough. And then we'll make it through. Yeah. I think is a blessing there too. But yeah, I definitely garner a lot of the themes from the stuff that my kids are going through as well. In Willa and the Whale, one of the main messages is you just need to talk Like you can't hold it all inside of you. You need help.
Get it out.
It's
Yep.
okay. Yeah. If you had a broken arm and you're like, well, I don't want anybody to know I have a broken arm, so I won't tell anybody. It's like, of course you're going to tell somebody. You need to get to a doctor, you know?
Yeah.
And if your head or your heart is broken or breaking, you need to get to a doctor too. And that's not anything to be ashamed of, you know?
Yeah.
And so just messages like
I love that you explained to the kids some of your discouragement that you had when you were getting started. Will you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started writing in 2010, and then you write these stories, and then in the publishing world, you send out queries where you say, hey, would you be willing to publish my book? You know, or would you be willing to represent my book if you're talking to an agent? And maybe I jumped in too soon. Maybe I wasn't quite ready when I started querying and sending these like, hey, what do you think?
Did you have a book ready when you did that? Because they don't
yeah.
always need, okay, you have to have
it's not only ready, it had been shopped with other people and like got feedback and fixed for like 2 years before I even started.
Okay.
Like, we're talking like some serious commitment to this book and this book and this book and this book. It took several books before I found one that kind of clicked. But I sent out probably close to 100 plus queries. Now we're talking over the course of like 3, maybe 4 years. So that's like, I don't know, a couple of months. It's not like anything too crazy.
And when you do that, are you submitting the whole manuscript, or is it usually just, they want to see a couple chapters and then they respond? How does that work?
They start by just asking you, describe your book in a paragraph. So sometimes the problem was your ability to describe your book in a paragraph. And that was the whole problem.
Okay.
They're like, you're not ready yet if you can't describe this book in a paragraph. Like it's not interesting sounding to me. So I'm just going to pass. Is legit, like that's fine. But yeah, a lot of it starts right there. And then if they say, oh, that sounds interesting, send me 5 chapters, send me the whole manuscript, I'll read it. And then there's the rejections that come after they've actually read anything that has to do with the book itself.
And that comes as a letter or an email, I guess.
We're doing emails nowadays. Yeah.
It used to be, right? Yeah.
Back in the day, people would send like their entire manuscript
in the snail mail.
In snail mail and have to wait for a response.
Painful.
I can't even imagine. But another author told me one time, Juniper Nielsen, she writes like Resistance and Words on Fire. I don't know if you're familiar with her books, but she said that she would not trade that time, the rejection time, for anything in the world, because she worked really hard. I'll use myself as an example, using her idea, but I worked really hard to get to the place where I could start sending out those emails. Like I busted my little backside trying to learn how to write books until I felt comfortable enough to send them out. And then there was that long period of being told no. Well, I didn't stop trying in there. In fact, I tried harder because I have to be getting close. I have to be close. And so that is the growth up to that point was like, oh, doing pretty good. But the growth during that period of rejection was like this. And I'll tell you what, once they say yes, you should always keep learning and keep growing. But I'm so busy writing that I'm no longer like trying super hard to like figure out all of the things. Like I'm just so busy writing that my growth is pretty steady and kind of back to this kind of normal growth. So I'm so grateful for that period of time where they were saying no, because it made me go,
it
okay,
pushed you.
Figure it out. It pushed me. And it's also, it's just what you've got to do. Like you learn that you've got that grit, right? That Angela Duckworth, not yet, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that it's okay to be rejected. It's okay to fail. Anything worth doing, any dream worth having is going to have a period of time where it like is really hard and it kind of stings and it's tricky. But if you really believe in it, you just don't quit. And good things
kids need to hear that, because in this time of social media and all the exposure that they have to, TV and Netflix and all the things they see where people are making it and being YouTube stars or influencers. And as they get older and get into junior high, they become very aware of those things, and it really affects their self-esteem. For them to hear you say, so much rejection was happening, but it pushed you further. Kids really need to hear that message, and hearing that there's a lot of failure that happens in a process, but you become better and better at it. So I loved that. We teach mindset now to kids, open mindset, closed mindset. And so when kids say things like, I can't do it, I can't write, there's nothing to write, we just add that one little word, yet, or just what you were saying with growth, you're growing and learning. And so thank you. This has been just such a fun interview. I hope people go and read your books. What's the most recent one you and your husband wrote together?
So we've been writing most of our books together lately, and Virtually Me came out in February. So Virtually Me is the newest one. That's why we had the event. Kind of like say, hey.
Yes. And I love the video with that one. You have a little video, right?
Yeah, we have a little video. And then we have one coming out in August called The Wild Journey of Juniper Berry. So
that's the one that I wondered if that was part of this year.
Yeah. But it's until summer. So
well, it's the best medicine for kids to read books that make these connections with how they're feeling and discovering, how to navigate through life and social settings and all the things that you're saying. So thank you. I always end with a little Christian thought. And so I was thinking about just a scripture that talks about how every man hath received the gift, even so minister the same one to another. And I was just thinking about how you have all these gifts and you're not keeping them inside, you're sharing them. And it took a lot of grit, a lot of perseverance for you to get to the point where you finally had someone say yes. And then think of just what a gift that ends up giving to us when you came and just in that 1 hour that you spent with us, it really kind of lit a fire under these kids and got them going. And we need that. How many schools do you think you visit during the springtime then?
During tour and stuff? Yeah. It just depends on what gets scheduled. I probably will go to maybe 5 to 10 locations in a season, and then visit 3. And I'll go for about a week in that location, anywhere from like 3 days to a week. And then I'll visit between 2 if we just didn't quite schedule very many, but usually about almost 4, maybe 5 schools a day.
Right.
So and great. If anybody's interested, you can jump on my website and ask for some information, and there's more information there too. So
it's perfect. I will put your website and your books and all the links. And thank you for your time. Keep writing. We're excited to see what you come up with. You're amazing.
And thanks for teaching. I'm so grateful for the teachers and the librarians out there. So thank you for your job.
It's good stuff. Kids are funny. They make us laugh every day. And that's how you're able to come up with even more material, I'm sure. Thank you, Shelly. You're amazing. Good luck to you.
Thanks.
Take care.
To submit a question or topic for further episodes, please email elementary.schooled@outlook.com. School is out for today, but please remember, when we strengthen a child, we strengthen society.